Player profiler posse. Week 3 is in the books, and what a week 3 it was. Devon A-Chain, what are we calling this man anymore? But it doesn't matter. The dude is phenomenal, putting up 4 total touchdowns. We had not to be overshadowed by Raheem Mostert. The Dolphins are cooking, but we enter week 4, and we have this Miami Dolphins team taking on Josh Allen and the Buffalo Bills. So there's a lot to talk about. You know what it is. I am Hilo, and this is Player Profiler. I am joined this beautiful Monday afternoon by none other than Todd Burrows. And if you've been around the best ball industry, the DFS industry, longer than this week, you know of Todd Burrows. You know who he is. Todd, how are we doing today, man?
I am always overjoyed to reunite with you, Mark, and to talk any kind of football.
Likewise, man. And you are, as soon as we took over this whole gig with First Mover, I knew that you were on the top of the list for somebody that I wanted to have on the show. You are the second guest that we've had on. I did a lot of solo type stuff. So really, really excited to dig into week 4. And along the same lines of what we say every beginning of this show, we have not spoken about the slate. We are getting our first reactions, our first look, the First Mover together. So I'm excited to check out the slate. Have you taken a look at the slate yet?
All I did was 10 minutes before the show, kind of just jotted down some notes on things that jumped out at me. Mostly guys that I would be interested in getting a second mover on.
Nice.
Which is better than a bowel mover. I mean, let's face it.
Well, it depends on who you ask, I guess.
Well, that's what a second mover typically is.
Yeah, so let's take a look at this. Let's take a look at this slate real quick. I mean, this is from a top level perspective. The slate it looks a lot like the slate that we saw over the first 2 weeks of the season, where there's one clear and away top expected game environment. There's 2 or 3 that are in this kind of nebulous range of game totals, similar or some, typically hovering around the 47.0 game total mark. So obviously, looking at the slate, something jumps out to us above all else, and that's this juicy 53.5 game total of the Miami Dolphins heading now to Buffalo to take on the Bills. So first reaction of this game environment, what jumps out to you just from a first reaction perspective?
Well, I haven't looked at the 4:00 game. So when I look, so my first reaction is because late swap is so important in DFS, the first thing I want to do is look at are the viable pivots late, or are the viable pivots early? And just looking there, I see only 2 late games, or is that
there's 3? Yeah,
there's 3. All right, so the Chargers and the Raiders, where's the over under on that? 47.5. And the Niners Cardinals at 44. I would expect that to rise a little, Mark. Would you?
Probably not, to be honest. And I think it's probably the Cardinals team total is probably not going to rise.
Yeah. All right. And then you got the Cowboys against the tough Patriots team. That one I could see even being a little lower than 43. So, but there is at least one way to pivot late. And that's important because because it allows you to split up if you want to go away from the chalky game. And I think after a team scores 70 fantasy points and then they go to play Josh Allen, I think people are going, and some of the pricing is still reasonable on Mostert and whatever A-Chain. I'm going to call him A-Chan.
It's the third time it's changed. So
yeah. Well, first he changed the first name, and yeah. Anyway, I thought only wide receivers were divas, but if the ownership gets to the point that I don't want to play it, I can take pieces of that game, try and hit the good pieces, hope the game comes in under, and use that Vegas Chargers game. I'll go right into DK pricing. Jimmy Garoppolo concussion. I played a lot of Aiden O'Connell late in best ball because Devontae Adams is a human spike week, and he's shown he can do it with anyone. Look up the price on Aiden, $4,000. So right there, that gives me a pivot. I don't think he's a downgrade from Jimmy Garoppolo necessarily, and it would put Jacoby Myers in play. So I think right away, if I want to have a pivot, there at least is a late pivot to get to.
Yeah, and this game environment is super interesting because we have an already hyper-concentrated pass offense with the Chargers that is now even more concentrated in the absence of Austin Eckler, that is now even more concentrated because Mike Williams, God rest his soul, tore his ACL this past week.
Oh, and Palmer's only 4K.
Yeah, so there's some interesting
he's going to be
aspects.
He's going to be chalky. I don't think this game is going to end up that much under-owned. I mean, if I can figure it out within 3 seconds, but at least it's something, if you're looking for first mover and how to think as a first mover, these are the kind of chess moves that you want to start considering.
Yeah, so like you said, this game is probably not going to go overlooked, but we do have this suppressing factor that it's a late game and that we're expecting to get some extreme levels of ownership from that Miami Dolphins and Buffalo Bills game. So yeah, there's a lot of interesting concepts when looking at kind of this slate from a top-down perspective. And we also have somewhat of a suppressing factor as far as the uncertainty with Jimmy Garoppolo. Is it going to be Brian Hoyer behind him with a full week of practice? Could we see preseason darling Aiden O'Connell? So there's a lot of interesting aspects of this game. And I just mentioned the hyper concentration, concentrated facet of this Chargers pass offense. Well, look at the Raiders. They have two players that are combining for 72% of the available targets in the offense when both of them are healthy, obviously, with one of them missing a game with a concussion. And then we have a running back in Josh Jacobs who has significantly underperformed to this point in the season, but is seeing 85% of the team's running back opportunities. So there's a lot of concentration expected. And we should also preface that discussion with, I don't think Austin Eckler is going to be back this week. The Chargers go on their bye in week 5. Why not give them, maybe a reason why not to give him another week is they're 0-3.
and they're going to think they can beat the Raiders without him.
Yeah. Well, sorry, right? They're not 0-3. They won last week, so they're 1-2.
But the Chargers are going to believe at home they can beat the Raiders without Eckler. So why put him out there and risk him? I think that's people underestimate the value of that thought when people are on the bubble. NFL coaches are always thinking, can I get the win?
Yeah, for sure. I like that thought process as well. So I guess that discussion kind of naturally leads us over to what's expected to be the game of the week here in Miami and Buffalo. We have one offense who is humming along, looking like one of the greater offenses over the previous 10 seasons in Miami. And we have a Bills team that has more or less we won't say they've underperformed, but they haven't gotten to the level where we expect them to be, where they're kind of treating every possession as if it is an opportunity to, improve to make a run at the Super Bowl. We haven't seen what this offense is going to be to its full potential yet. They're still messing around with heavy rates of 12 personnel with Dawson Knox and Dalton Kincaid. So how do you think all those pieces come together? Is this something that the field is just going to look at this 53.5 game total and just bite into this game environment? Or do you think there's going to be some level of pause here particularly with the Buffalo Bills?
Oh, I don't think the price. I mean, I don't think that the factor that you just mentioned will slow it down as much as the pricing. So
Yeah.
you know, go back to that game, and you know, start at quarterback. So right away you're at least at 7,400. Now hit flex, and you got 9,200, 8,100, 7,600, 6,500. So it's a game that if you take a few pieces, you're going to have a few. In other words, like a lot of the work that you do, Mark, is what's the slate going to look like? What's the average build going to be? Mm-hmm. I mean, this game is going to lock you into certain builds. You're going to need a few low-priced players. You're going to see a lot of these teams with Josh Palmer at $4,000. That way, people will get a piece of that Charger game. So all the more, again, it makes me want to take two pieces, one of each team from this game, and play it with the other one. Now, that being said, Justin Herbert's also 70. Let's go over to that one.
Yep.
So, I mean, you know, you've got 7,800. So if you, I mean, let's face it, Josh McDaniels he's bad, right? I mean, I could absolutely see him going to. I mean, remember Brian Hoyer had been around a couple years when he had that big year with Josh Gordon in 2012. Right, yeah. Brian Hoyer was for many years a decent backup. Brian Hoyer is terrible now, right? Like if you've seen him the last few times he had to play, he's not the Brian Hoyer that we even remember. But I could see Josh McDaniels playing him. But if Aiden O'Connor is available at $4,000, I think there's going to be a lot of people who won't play O'Connell at 4K even. I can't see him getting above about 10% ownership. So, you know, maybe I'm wrong, but the things I'm seeing here is the games everyone's going to want to play is going to bring a lot of salary along and a lot of average builds that, you know, a lot of builds that look the same. So let's look at the next two or three high scoring games and see if we can find something that isn't going to make us want to throw up for passing on these two spots that we like.
Yeah, there's a couple of spots, and we'll get into those real quick. But if you're paying attention at home, you can kind of get the sense that Todd and I are both speaking about the Raiders situation as if Jimmy G is going to be out. And if we look at kind of how teams and the league are handling these concussion situations, I don't think we have seen a single concussed player play the following week. Through 3 weeks, does anybody come to mind that has
come Jimmy's back to had play? A few, and Jimmy's had a few of them, I think.
Yeah, so this is a situation where it's highly likely that Jimmy Garoppolo is going to be out. And it's interesting also, I don't know if Jimmy G self-reported symptoms after the game, but there was that weird hit in the third quarter where he looked like he was kind of flabbergasted. He looked like he was a little woozy. And he came back into the game and finished the game. So that might be some additional work that goes on behind the scenes with the league and with the NFLPA, where we might hear some more about this story moving forward as well. Because I don't know. All I saw was that Jimmy Garoppolo was placed in the concussion protocol per Josh McDaniels. I didn't see any reports of when that happened or how that happened, if it was self-reported or what. Have you seen anything to that extent?
That's all that's out there.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So looking at kind of down the list of top expected game environments from there, we have Washington Commanders at Philadelphia Eagles with a 44.5 game total, but a 7-point spread. We have here we go. We have the Denver Broncos at the Chicago Bears with a somewhat healthy for these teams 46-point game total currently. We have the Vikings, who are now 0-3, taking on a Carolina Panthers team that could again be without their starting quarterback. But in that discussion, we have Andy Dalton, who attempted 58 passes in his absence this week. And also
by the way, Andy Dalton, I mean, his hair has gotten redder as time has gone on. And so if he is coloring his hair, and, I think it's reasonable assumption that he is, he's really following through, because the eyebrows are also a really, really, I mean, he is really going for, the look.
You got to, man. You got to own that if you got it. Shoot, I would.
Yeah, once I went bald, it was over. So
I was gonna say, would you rather be bald, or would you rather have red hair? No, I'm just kidding. Just kidding.
Hold on, do I have a coin somewhere?
Flip it, baby. So I went through and highlighted kind of the 4 games that we talked about there, the Commanders and the Eagles. This is the one we didn't get to. It's the Rams and the Colts, who are currently playing to a 45.0 opening line with a nice little spread of 1 point. And I think that takes into account that Vegas is currently expecting Anthony Richardson back, I would say, with that opening spread. Would you agree, or you think this is Minshew mania?
I mean, I would expect Richardson to be back. But, in my notes, I wrote down Justin Fields at 6,600 and Matt Stafford at 5,700. And, one of the things that really amazes me about the NFL is that, with analytics starting to come and be more popular, things that 10 years ago, running quarterbacks, everyone running, it's always funny to me to find coaches who have to learn a lesson and then the next year act as if they don't remember the lesson that they had to learn the year before.
Is this a Luke Getsy discussion?
Well, I don't know who you want to blame for the decision, because a lot of times I only blame the head coach. Right, because a lot of times the offensive coordinator, his job is to try and put up points and to try and impress people so he can be a head coach. A head coach a lot of times thinks high-minded thoughts, and I've worked with a bunch of sales managers and CEOs, and sometimes it is the sales manager who's an idiot, and sometimes it's the owner who's the idiot. But anyway. The fact that they are not running design, because when Justin Fields was running design plays, he was also a better passer.
Yeah.
And, the guy was putting up 45-point weeks, and they don't run the ball with him. It's like buying a frickin' Maserati and driving around the parking lot at a Walmart. It is insane. So I have to, being someone, with best ball, a lot of best ball is about figuring out the puzzle that includes the player and the coaches, and whether the coaches, the GMs, whoever are rational players or not, and where are they rational and where are they not.
Yeah.
Matt Eberflus is going to lose his job if this team goes 2-12. 2-15, whatever, right? And it'll be the next coach who gets Caleb Williams. So I feel like at some point they're going to wake up and start calling a number of designed runs for Justin Fields. I would say week 4 in a game that's very, very winnable, I'm going to be well over on Justin Fields until they figure this out, because the salary is just going to keep dropping. And if he puts up a 45 spot with 6.6 salary, you're going to win yourself a lot of money.
An interesting aspect in that discussion of Justin Fields is something that we covered on this show heading into week 2. And that's the way to beat Justin Fields is to make him think. And even after this week 3 loss, he came out and said, like, or before the week 3 game, he came out and said, like, yo, I know I do the prep, but when it gets to game day, I just want to go out there and ball. It's like, yeah, because you don't have to read a defense when you're under pressure and you're escaping and you're trying to run. You're just doing what comes naturally to you. That's important, I think. And in week 2, for the listeners, you'll remember we were targeting DJ Moore against Tampa Bay because Tampa Bay was near the top of the league in blitz rate. So we expected them to be getting after Justin Fields, and he wouldn't have to think in that situation when he's under pressure. He could just deliver the ball to his first read and move on, or escape the pocket and move on. But when you sit back and when you make Justin Fields try and read and diagnose a defense, that's where he's getting into all this trouble. That's important, I think, because now he's playing a Denver Broncos team that is likely not going to blitz him a ton. You look at Vance Joseph, and he's very comfortable settling into this man or zone. He plays both, but he's very comfortable not blitzing. And if I'm Vance Joseph, I just got embarrassed. Am I going to want to go and put Fields in a situation where he excels by blitzing a ton? Or am I going to want to sit back and just let him have to read my zone defense? Well, if I'm sitting in his shoes, I'm going to go just play a shit ton of cover 2 and cover 3 and rush 3 and 4 and just basically contain the edge, make sure that Fields is not able to get out on the edge, and make him read my defense. That's an interesting discussion. I don't know. Obviously, this is our first reaction. I haven't broken this game down yet. But that's kind of where my initial thoughts take me. Any reaction to that, Todd?
Not really.
Okay.
Sorry.
No, not at all.
I don't want to get into the mind of Vance Joseph.
Yeah.
I mean, we're talking about a guy who's a defensive coordinator for the team he used to be the head coach for. Am I wrong?
As far as playing them?
No, wasn't Vance Joseph the head? Which team's got Vance Joseph?
Vance Joseph was, hold on, I'm looking it up now. Now I'm drawing a blank.
Wasn't he the Broncos head coach?
He was, yeah, 2017, 2018. You are correct.
And where is he the defensive coordinator now?
The Broncos.
So, yeah, all right. I mean, I don't know that I've ever heard of that before. But
a head coach coming back to the organization?
As a defensive coordinator, yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah. So, no, but I like Fields. I also like Stafford next week.
Yeah.
You put Stafford in a dome and 5,700, and look at Puka. He's still in the 6s.
Yeah, pricing came out before his game tonight. So
yeah, and Atwell is I think 5.5 from what I looked at.
Yep.
And what's Higbee?
Dead.
Yeah. So and Kyron I think was 6K. So, I mean that's pretty damn attractive. I think that unfortunately Pittman was 6.5. Which is a little higher than I would like. But
yeah,
go look at Josh Downs, 3,500. And he played as the number 2 yesterday, from what I was reading. You're the stat man.
Yeah, I'm looking that up right now, actually, as you were talking, because I was interested. I hadn't seen that yet. No, I mean, he's playing the slot role. Michael Pittman, 100% snap rate. Alec Pierce, 96% snap rate. Josh Downs, 80%.
But what about targets? Who got the second most targets?
Yeah, it was Downs. Alec Pierce is seeing all the downfield stuff.
Yeah. So, and you're going to get less of that with Minshew. Although they haven't let Richardson throw deep much yet either. But my point is, this is a really interesting game, right? So this is the kind of game where if ownership stays low, you can really get some good leverage, and the pieces of this game can help you to get you can add pieces from those other good games to these pieces and build some really good lineups, I think.
Zach Moss. Yeah, it's a guy we didn't mention.
What was
he's at 6K. He's at 6K.
Yeah. So I mean, if you're using an optimizer to build, you could make a lot of really good lineups with this game as the base.
Yeah. There's the average salary right here, you're below with these these 7 pieces here. You're below 5,500 a player, which is the baseline expectation.
Yeah. And there's not a lot, unless some value opens up we're not expecting. Other than Palmer at 4K and down, I wrote down Palmer at 4K, Downs at 3.5, at Thielen at 4.5. Dell is still 4.6. So Tank, that's my boy Tank Dell. There really isn't a lot to like. Ferguson is 3.5, and Goddard is 4.4. Goddard is really well priced this week.
Yeah. There's also the aspect of 2 of these teams on the main slate next weekend are playing on Monday Night Football. Before we get kind of that piece of the pie here, or that piece of the puzzle here. What happens if Puka goes out tonight and sees 15 more targets? What's Puka's ownership going to be like next week with 3 consecutive games of insane usage? I mean, this is a guy who has set NFL records for most targets over the first 2 games of a career, most targets in a single game for a rookie, most receptions in a single game for a rookie. What happens if he sees 15 looks again tonight? What's his ownership going to be like tomorrow at 6,700? Not tomorrow, next week.
Well, I mean, I don't know.
Yeah, so there's some interesting aspects at play there as well. And then obviously the other big one is Philadelphia. We have a Philadelphia offense who's playing tonight, and the Eagles they're not the same team. Let's just make that very clear. Their offense is very, very close to the same team. They maintained all of the same pieces. They have the top blocking offensive line in the league, but their defense is not the same team. And I think we can highlight kind of that idea here. If we look at, let's just pull up, I know he's probably not going to play, but that big green 32nd next to Washington's matchup, this is a team who is bleeding production over the middle of the field right now. And now they have additional injuries to deal with in the secondary. We have James Bradbury who's stepping into the lineup. There's a lot of moving pieces in the secondary and primarily with the linebacking core that is very different from last year. They basically they saw their linebacking core basically get decimated through free agency in the offseason. And they brought in basically rushers and edge players to fill those gaps. So they're still going to generate a ton of pressure on that defensive line, but they are struggling in tight end coverage. They are struggling against opposing slot wide receivers, and they are struggling against opposing pass catching running backs because of that coverage from their linebacking core. So why is that important? Well, they're playing a Washington Commanders team that has some of those pieces to take advantage of some of that. Are you at all? This is a guy. Just come here, lean in real quick. How do you feel about Cole Turner?
I think the guy's got some juice. I think he has some juice. I started taking a few shares very late in best ball, and I didn't get to watch much of that Buffalo game yesterday. They obviously, but when you have a quarterback in his first year, a lot of times he will have these games where, especially on the road, one of his first games on the road where he's just terrible. So where is this game? It's Philly.
It's in Philly, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, this game doesn't interest me as much. But I think, obviously, I mentioned Goddard. What did Dotson do yesterday? Did he do anything?
No.
Four targets. I mean, that's really disappointing. What about F1?
Similar.
6 targets, 6 of 6. Yeah, they just couldn't move the ball yesterday. I'll tell you a guy that I was drafting a ton of. I don't like him on DraftKings as much, but Brian Robinson. I mean, Philly's not really the team to play a running back against, but especially on half PPR, I was loading up on Brian Robinson the last month or two of best ball. I felt that the team had signaled he was the guy they liked more, and then you started hearing news that they were also trying to get him in the pass game a little bit. I know we hear that at times and it doesn't work out, but it didn't seem to happen yesterday. But anyway, enough on this game. I personally, do you like it more than I do?
No, we're kicking it together, man. We're just working through the slate, and I wanted to throw it out because it has a moderate game total. But before we jump to the next game environment, real quick, we're going to hear from the Podfather himself about the new DFS Dominator.
DFS getting harder every year, but we're here to make it easier with the DFS Dominator because I know a lot of optimizers keep coming out. Oh, our optimizer. What about this optimizer? But that optimizer. Well, we have a cash game optimizer that leverages the projections from Dario, Billy, the award-winning projections at playerprofiler.com, and builds the best lineups for cash games that have both upside and stability, because that's what you want. It's a couple clicks, boom, boom, boom. You get the best possible lineup for your cash games. But for tournaments, traditional optimizers don't work. That's why we have a Lineup Genius, which takes you through the process of building lineups the way they should be built. Which quarterbacks you want to be overweight on, then building stacks, then setting runbacks, then optimizing, and generating up to 150 lineups that you can easily import into DraftKings, into FanDuel. That's the DFS Dominator. It's only $45 a year, not a week, a year. Just go to Player Profiler, click on the DFS Dominator from the menu, and you won't be sorry.
Welcome back. We are now back. I'm here with Todd Burrows. We are talking about the Week 4 DFS first look here on First Mover. The game I want to talk about next, Todd, is one that we kind of went over a little bit earlier, but I want to dig into a little bit more of the meat and potatoes here, and that's Denver and Chicago. And I want to specifically talk about the Denver Broncos. Do you think, and we look at, I think it was...
in general, no.
Okay. What about Mr. Marvin Mims? Are you at all interested there?
I mean, the guy's got like 7 touches and like 1 million points. And you, again, rational coaching. I mean, I would think Sean Payton was a rational coach, right? But after he showed, what was his snap rate this week versus last week?
About the same.
So
let me get your real number.
I mean, there. The guy gets 2 big touchdowns and you play him the same. So now he's 3,900.
It was exactly.
I got to say that I have less interest. I would rather double down on Palmer, who I know is going to be on the field, than Mims, who might be. I know I'm giving up a little bit of ceiling to do that and possibly some ownership. Now, I will be looking for other go look at $4,000 receivers. So is there anyone else in that range that just in general? So
Shark maybe.
Shaheed is but he didn't play all that much. Shark at $4,000. Look, let's open up Shark. 11 targets. I mean,
Yeah, and
he
Jonathan
wasn't very
Mingo was concussed last week as well. He's probably not going to play in week 4.
And Burks is there. Go down a little further. And for Quentin Johnson, maybe. I mean, Downs. So, I want to. I love Mims. I like Mims' tape. I drafted him when he was very late in best ball, when people weren't drafting him yet, really. But I can't assume rational coaching here right now.
Yeah, I think it was Scott Barrett who put out on Twitter today that like 7 or 8 of the top 10 longest plays from scrimmage this year have been Marvin Mims, and he has 10 touches or something, 11 touches.
And played, very little.
Yeah, he was only in 24% snap rate, again outsnapped by Brandon Johnston or Johnson. Brandon Johnson and Lil Jordan Humphrey were both elevated 3 times, which is the max that they can be elevated in a single season from the practice squad. That's why I was looking at. I didn't know if these guys were signed to the squad yet or not.
Who?
Brandon Johnson and Lil Jordan Humphrey are the two wide receivers
Little Jordan was a guy that Peyton had in New Orleans. I don't know that people remember that.
Mm-hmm.
So, I think that, I don't get it. He's 0-3. I mean, he's probably wishing he was back in the booth right now. I'm sure he hates Russ.
Okay, so Humphrey was signed to the active roster, it looks like. I don't know about Brandon Johnson, to be honest. I was thinking like maybe he's out of moves there with those two, but they have been signed, it looks like. So yeah, I don't know. We can only hope that we start to see Sean Payton wake up a little bit and play Marvin Mims. I like trying to be early on that, but I don't know if I'll get there this week. Like you said, it takes a little bit of a leap of faith. Anything else from this game environment before we move on?
Hold on one sec. Carolina. No, we covered. What did Hayden Hurst do yesterday?
Not much, if my memory serves me correct.
Because week 1, and this is what I love about, he got 7 targets, was on the field all the time, then 2 weeks of 3. All right. He was a guy, how every year, week 1, you're sitting there thinking to yourself, boy, I missed the boat on that guy in best ball. Yeah. And then week 3, at least a third, 2/3 of the guys you were worried about, you weren't worried about anymore. Last year, I was worried about CEH after 2 weeks. Yeah. All right. Let's. Is there anything else? Anything else interesting
from this game?
No.
Just overall?
Other games, yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah. There always is interesting stuff. This is an interesting one. Pitt and Houston. And I think I just got done providing rave reviews of CJ Stroud, of Bobby Slowick, the offensive coordinator in Houston, who we know hails from the Kyle Shanahan, Gary Kubiak coaching tree, but he's running this offense like he's been doing this for a while. It's very, very impressive the way that Bobby Slowick is running this Houston offense. I'm seeing layered route concepts. I'm seeing schemed usage to get the ball into Nico Collins' hands and Tank Dell's hands in space. I'm seeing double moves. I'm seeing outside zone run concepts. He's running a legitimate offense, and CJ Stroud looks good. What's your take on this Houston offense?
I mean, I don't watch college football. So when I go into watching tape of college players, I don't have preconceived notions. Mm-hmm. And again, it's 3 games in. I could be wrong. But I was looking at Anthony Richardson's college tape, CJ Stroud's, and Bryce Young. And I was wondering how anyone could consider drafting any of them over Stroud. His arm was so much better. I mean, a lot of what Bryce Young did, he did with Alabama. And just, I don't know. I just had to say that Stroud was, and I came around on Anthony Richardson because of the running and the ability to be a big breaker. And the other thing that really won me on Anthony Richardson was Anthony Richardson. The way he handled himself, the way you would get reports that he was the first guy in, hearing all the things that you want to hear about a raw player got me so that I'm at least slightly overweight on Richardson and best ball after a slow start. I just have a hard time with this game because Pittsburgh puts a tremendous amount of pressure on quarterbacks. And I think that based on the hype that they're getting, my expectation is the ownership isn't going to take into account the risk enough. It's the kind of offense against Pittsburgh that if Stroud is 1, 2, 3%, and his weapons, Collins is 10 and Dell is 10, I would have sincere interest even against Pittsburgh. But I expect it to be a little higher. I think that, with not a lot of savings, I think that Tank Dell could be a 20+% guy. I think that Collins could be 15. And in that case, I'd rather put them in games without Stroud than stacking that game, especially since even though Pittsburgh looked better last week. Now, let's look at Pittsburgh because what's Pickens?
Real quick, before we do that, you might be thinking or asking, hey, Hilo, scroll up a little bit. You're only showing players priced 5,500 and below. That is the top skill position player from this game is priced at 5,500. So that's a little bit interesting to me. Going over to quarterback, these quarterbacks are also priced down. So the highest cost.
Look at Pickett's rushing yards yesterday. So again, it's hard for me to get behind a guy who, against a bad defense, only put up 18 points with running.
Yeah.
But I will have a lot of interest in Pickens.
Okay.
At 5-4.
We know Deontay is going to remain out.
Go back to how many targets he got yesterday. I went to bed.
It was 6? Yeah.
So, I have a lot of interest in George Pickens at that price. And I have a lot of interest in Tank Dell at 46.
We finally saw some level of explosive play from this Pittsburgh Steelers offense last night through the form of a 72-yard touchdown to Calvin Austin. Are you at all interested? He's only priced at 3,300 here. Yeah, he saw 6 targets, but this is a guy who was actually on the field over Allen Robinson in 2 wide sets.
I mean, if I really, I went from 0 interest and then you said he was over Allen Robinson and 6 targets. I mean, he needs 2 big plays. I mean, at 3-3, if he get you 15 points again, you're thrilled, right?
Yeah.
But too often, those kind of guys have let people down in DFS.
Yep. I understand that for sure. We're coming off of, and we'll preface this discussion with on the backdrop of this season, scoring has been down. Take away the Miami Dolphins blow up 70-pointer, but scoring is down, and scoring has been down since the 2020 season. And we've theorized in these woods that game overstacks are going to build a lot more leverage than the field is likely to utilize them if you get that game right. I mean, we had 2 games last weekend, the Chargers and Vikings, and then if you were on the Dolphins, where you could have built a GPP crushing roster if you were just using players from those 3 teams. Do you see a spot like that this week, or are we likely to see the winning score it takes to ship a GPP back down around 200 instead of 290 that it was this week?
Well, I think if you're building a roster with 150 or more teams, you should set aside just like best ball, right? Like zero running back. Let's take it over to zero running back. You might not be a zero running back believer, but it's egregious to build 150 lineups and have no zero running back teams, right? Okay. It's ridiculous to build a portfolio of 150 best ball teams and not have some robust running back builds. I think overstacks are absolutely a 10 to 15% must in a portfolio, and they need to be strategically done. I think that, when you get that, that high you get when you're chasing the top of the leaderboard in a DFS contest, and you look and you've got 5 guys live, from that game, your heart leaps because you know that you've got a much better chance than other people to, if that game continues to go back and forth. And the reason that the Broncos game didn't produce more winners is because the Broncos didn't keep up, right? Yep. They didn't hold their end of the bargain. If the Broncos had gotten a little more, if Sutton hadn't fumbled those 2 plays, it could have been a completely different dynamic. If he ended up catching, he dropped a second touchdown and he had 2 fumbles. I mean, if Sutton put up a 35-point game, it's a completely different day today. So I think absolutely overstacks are very, very important, but I wouldn't build 50% of my lineups that way. I would pick somewhere between 10 and 35%. Do you think that's a fair number?
Yeah, I think that's fair. For my MME brethren, I'm a single entry 3-max type myself, so I am not afraid to overexpose or overextend in some aspects. This last week I had 1 game overstack of that Minnesota and Chargers game, and I did not overstack the Dolphins at all this week. That was on me. But yeah, I think I'm not afraid to kind of lean into that a little bit more. Sorry about that. I got an alarm going off here. The last thing I want to talk about, Todd, before we get out of here is what I have highlighted on the screen. We have a Bengals team that has not looked good passing the football. But we also have a Tennessee defense that just made Deshaun Watson and company look coherent for the first time all season, or maybe since he came back into the league. Are you at all interested in a potentially low-owned potential eruption spot here for the Bengals pass offense?
I never get Joe Burrow right.
So this is go on your first read and then go the other way this week.
I know, but that was a preface to the pass funnel on the Titans. Mm-hmm. We know the explosion for the Bengals is coming. So for me, it would come down to percentage of ownership. If Joe Burrow is 5% owned, 6% owned, and if they have another bad game tonight, I think that's in the cards. Mm-hmm. I definitely would probably go 15% versus that 5. Get nice 3-to-1 leverage with a pass funnel. Try and incorporate parts from the other 2 big games we talked about. Throw in a Palmer, throw in the good cheap value. And I normally don't double stack Burrow if I have Chase, and I will double stack him sometimes with Higgins. But long story short, this one is really dependent on ownership for me more than the other spots because of the inconsistency. I need to get paid off on the ownership.
Yeah, put yourself in future use shoes. We're sitting there on Tuesday morning. and Joe Burrow doesn't play Monday evening, and Jamar Chase falls flat, T. Higgins falls flat. Now we have Joe Burrow coming back into the roster at 2% ownership, maybe something insane like that. This just feels like it could be fruitful, and that is your last look at the first look. Todd, thank you, my man, for coming on here and shooting it with us. We might have to do this again, man, because that was a damn pleasure. Any parting shots? I will throw it over to you to let the listeners know where they can find your work, because I know you have moved homes.
Yep, I'm working over at Sharp Football Analysis. I'm doing a Thursday night prop show every week where Ryan McChrystal, who's a really bright guy, we give a prop for the Thursday night show, and we talk about the Thursday night show. Then we'll go through Ryan's 5 or 6 props of the week from his article, and then I will do very similar thing to what I did here today, but with more knowledge of, I'll at least have initial ownership reads, and I'll give, some kind of bullet point guys that I'm looking for the week. Mark, always a pleasure. Thank you for having me on. Anytime you need me, brother.
Of course, man. And like we said, we'll have to hit this again, but go follow Todd. Throw out your Twitter handle there for the folks that are listening as well.
At bestball NFL.
Beautiful. Go follow Todd at bestball NFL. Go check out his work at Sharp Football Analysis. And until next time, my friend, we will see you. This was First Mover.
Hey, I want to take a moment to thank you for tuning in. It's important to me that all of our media be free. This is only possible because of you allowing a true independent sports media enterprise to thrive unlike any other in the business. So please subscribe to the All In Package to continue to make all of this possible, to ensure that all of our stats, information, data, content is available to you, especially you, the people that get the site and get the show.